I thought I'd do a video on power, how to have power in conversations, how to maintain power. I'm John from Bulldog Mindset.com, and on this channel, I teach you, amongst many things, how to maintain power, how to have social skills, social awareness, how to build wealth, and to build the kind of life that you want. So let's talk specifically about power here, and about how to maintain it in a conversation and how you lose it. So, the conversation that I was talking with someone about, we were talking about this idea that when you basically lose emotional control, you give up power, right? And so basically what we tend to do is we tend to default to authoritarian types of power plays, which are power plays that involve a display of anger and trying to exercise our authority. A lot of times it will resort down to physical violence. And that is actually the weakest form of control. When we go down to that state, we're actually giving up almost all of our power and saying that we're so powerless that our only way of exerting our will upon other people is to go down to either a threatening fear response, or worse yet, to the physical manipulation level, basically physically forcing people to do what we want, okay? Whether that be through violence, through combat, through just picking someone up and trying to make them do something. That is really the weakest that we can, right? Because we, in that sense, we cannot, our will, okay, our frame is so weak that we have to use physical force or control to actually exert our dominance. And there are cases where that is necessary, where that is the level at which things need to be played out. But it's much more powerful to be able to do something without that, okay? To be able to get people to do what you want. Here's a good example. Take like a police officer, for instance, right? A police officer in a uniform, okay, typically, for most people, will be able to tell them to do something and they're going to do it. He will very rarely have to resort to physical force, okay? A police officer with a gun drawn has even more power. Now, he's actually resorted one level lower, okay? But he's implemented force in that case, right? There's a threat of physical violence. So it's actually less powerful to pull the gun. If you can tell someone to do something, and if you're in a police uniform, if you are a police officer, you're going to have a lot of authority and power associated with that, okay? But if you can tell someone to do something, that's the highest level, okay? And then if you have to use the threat of physical violence, okay, that's kind of a lower level, okay? It's actually less power, all right? The more the actual power, the powerful action is, the least powerful frame it is. At the very lowest level, maybe the police officer would actually get into physical combat with a criminal or an assailant or something like that, and get into a physical altercation where they have to actually handcuff them or hit them with a stun gun, right? That's the least level of power, okay, but it's the most aggressive action. When we're in conversations with people, what we tend to do is we tend to go there quickly, right? So if you're hot-headed, if you get angry a lot of the time, that's what you're trying to do. You're basically trying to bully and intimidate people in order to get them to do what you want, all right? And that displays a very loose, a very weak sense of power. It's the exact opposite of having good frame control. When I talk about frame control, I'm talking about setting the narrative, setting the reality, okay, and other people buying into that reality. That's really what a frame is, a powerful frame, and what frame control is. And it's a very, very powerful concept, okay? Because if your frame is strong enough, people will buy into your reality, and you can set what that reality to be. Now, what are the keys to doing this? What is the key to getting people to buy into your frame and to have that kind of power and not let that power go? So one of the keys, the biggest key, which we already talked about, is emotional mastery, is not allowing your emotions to dictate your actions, right? So when you're in a conversation with someone, all right, and you're trying to get them to do what you want, the best course of action that you can do is to use the power that you already have, right? So if you're in a position of authority, right, this is where this really applies, or you have some kind of power or leverage, you want to use that power in order to get the compliance, okay, to get them to bend into your frame or to do what you want, to basically break their frame. What you don't want to do is you don't want to use threats, anger, emotion, violence, anything below that, because once you stoop to that level, you've basically given up that other degree of power that you have and you can't get it back. A good example would be a teacher in a classroom. Right? A teacher in a classroom has a certain degree of power. Okay, now I'm sure you've been in a classroom where the teacher did not recognize their authority or their power. And what they would do is, I've been in classrooms where the kids are acting up all the time, this one particular teacher, right? And there's sort of a pattern that you see, right? Which is this teacher gets really fucking pissed off when the kids act up, right? So teacher's drawing on the board, has their back turned, spitball or whatever, some kids are goofing off. They turn around and they're like, they start yelling, "Hey, cut that shit out right now." Right? And they're yelling. Okay, they're basically losing all of their power. I want to give you the scenario because you're probably familiar with it. You've probably seen this. You may have seen this at work, right? Have you ever had a boss where you just don't fuck with this guy because he means business, because he doesn't even argue with you, right? And that's another key, okay? So what you can learn from that is recognize what you have. If you can get someone upset, if you can push their buttons and you can control their emotions, you are the puppeteer and they are the puppet. Okay? Do you want to be the puppet or the puppeteer, right? If someone can make you feel a certain way and react and act a certain way, you are not the one who's powerful. It doesn't matter if you're raging. It doesn't matter if you're being physically violent. It doesn't matter if you can even kick their fucking ass, okay? You are still the puppet, okay? You may be beating the puppeteer, but the puppeteer's the one making you do it. He's pulling your strings, right? And that's what you have to recognize, okay? So it doesn't mean that you never have to resort to physical violence. We're men. We're in a society where sometimes that's the only message and that's the only rule of law, and sometimes that is the only answer, okay? I'm well aware of that. But what I'm saying is that when you allow that to happen out of anger or out of rage or something like that, out of a lack of emotional control, you're giving up all of that power, and you lose that power and you can't get it back. Another way that you can maintain and build power is to completely ignore something that someone says that you don't like or that doesn't fit your narrative. As soon as you indulge it, as soon as someone throws an objection, okay, or says something that counters your frame or your reality, and you chase the bait and you try and debate it, you're giving it credibility, okay? And you're being taken off your track. You're losing your power. Someone who has power and who has authority, they don't have to answer to someone else. They don't have to answer questions. They don't have to respond to someone's bullshit. They just go on and pretend like nothing happened, okay? Now, at some point, someone can really amp it up and they can force you to respond, and that's where you respond decisively with action or whatever power that you have. That's a real test of your power, right? What can you actually do, right? Now, there's situations where you don't have the authority, where you don't have the power, and you have to mock it to some degree, right? You have to fake it, and it's a bluff, right? It's a bluff. Basically, you're applying the same exact set of principles, but you know that you could get called on your bluff, and if you do, you're not going to have anything to back it up. Then you may actually have to resort to lower levels of power, which again might be something like intimidation, fear, or violence, okay? But you don't want to have to get to that situation. And really, kind of the counter there is that if someone knows that you're a person that is level-headed and calm, stoic in your mindset, but you're capable of violence, especially if they've seen or heard of you doing violence before, they're not going to fuck with you. That's like a level of power that you don't even have to demonstrate. You only have to demonstrate it once, and they're not going to fuck with you because they know that you will go there. And sometimes the most threatening thing, the most dangerous thing, is not violence itself, but the threat of violence. I remember going to, one of my acting classes, we had this scene in acting, right? And my acting coach, he was really just this really interesting guy, okay? I remember, showing up to acting class, and he's this kind of really short, kind of, pudgy guy, just kind of really, you get this kind of nice guy vibes off of him, kind of a dorky looking guy. And he's got this super hot Swedish girlfriend that's like a foot taller than him. And I was like, the first time I remember I did a scene with her, like a love scene, like my first day in acting class. And I'm like looking at this, I'm like, oh, this is your girlfriend, like that I almost made out with. Like, that's okay. That's really interesting. Like, I didn't even believe it, right? But anyway, so this guy, okay, like, I want to give you some context so you understand about this story. But anyway, what happened was we did this scene from Usual Suspects. That's what it was, okay? Yeah, the whole movie where it's like, Kevin Spacey is playing the role of Kaiser Sose, right? Who is, Kaiser Sose, that whole thing. And there's like this questioning scene. I don't remember the exact scene, but there's this interrogation room scene, right? And he had one of the actors in the class go up and do that scene. And when we do a scene in acting class, it's like kind of your own interpretation. Like you're not even really supposed to watch the movie, right? You're just supposed to kind of, interpret from the dialogue. Like this is your interpretation of it. That's how actors actually do this, right? So had one of the guys go up and, one of the guy was pretending to be, the Kaiser Sose being interrogated, and the other guy was the cop, like, or FBI, whatever, interrogating him. And, he got up to the desk and he's like, fuck you, right? He's like, what the fuck, right? And he's just in his face. He's like, knocks the fucking chair over, right? He's like, fuck you. He gets right in his face, lifts him up, right? Picks him up by the collar, and he's like, fucking tell me, motherfucker, right? And he's just in his face, all right? So, the other guy is just like, just being cool, right? He's perfectly playing this Kaiser Sose role, just like pretending to be a little bit intimidated, right? And it's just like you're watching the scene and it's just not hitting. You're like, It's like, okay, I get what he's doing. He's doing kind of a good job of it, but it doesn't feel like he's breaking him, right? Like he doesn't really feel like he's scaring him, even though he's being really violent, right? He's almost getting to the point of actually being physically violent, and he's yelling and he's throwing shit, where he just can't get a rise, right? And you're not feeling it in the crowd, okay? Then my acting coach, the pudgy guy with the hot Swedish girlfriend, okay, he comes up, all right, and he's just like, and he like slowly sits down, the desk, kind of crosses his arms, and he makes like a quick movement, like, and then he's like, he has a cigarette, he just puts it out right on the table. Just calmly. Starts speaking slowly to the guy. He's like, I don't know what the lines were. But he's just really, really calm, right? Just really calm and collected. And every once in a while he'll make like a jerky movement. Just like you kind of jump. And you're watching the scene, right? You're watching this and you're scared. You're like, what the fuck is he gonna do? Like you're like, oh my, like you're sitting there riveted because you're like, what the fuck is he gonna do? Is he actually gonna fucking kill this guy? Like, is he gonna pull out a knife and stab him in the fucking throat? Like, this is, like, you are riveted, right? And he goes through this whole scene, and he's just like, he doesn't slap the guy, he doesn't throw anything, right? He just gets up really close to them at the end, and, like, delivers that last line, and you're just like, you could hear a fucking pin drop in the room. Because everyone is scared to fucking death. They're like, I don't even know, like, and you look at the guy's face, and like I said, he's this jolly guy, right, that you think is just a total nice guy, and now you think he might have killed like 50 people and buried them in his backyard in Santa Monica. Like, that's how serious this shit is. The threat of violence is way more powerful than violence itself. And that's the whole thing. That's the whole dynamic of power, is being a person that doesn't make threats, that doesn't degrade himself down to that lower level, ignores things that he doesn't like to hear, ignores things that doesn't fit his narrative, and takes decisive action. When it's time to take action, you know what your options are. You know what your power is. You don't make a threat. You just do something. And so people, they know that when you have made up your mind and you've decided that that is how it's going to be, they know they can't argue with you because you're not even going to fucking listen. They can't reason with you because you're not going to be reasoned with, because your will is what is going to be done. And when you're in that powerful of a frame, that's pretty much the most powerful frame that you can have. A big portion of that, like I said, is developing emotional mastery, is being able to control your emotions, right? You can't directly control your emotions, but you can control how you respond when those emotions come up, right? So if something makes you angry, you're currently wired to be angered by that thing, right? The first issue in getting angry is that you have some expectation that's not met, right? Actually, even before that comes the idea that someone has wronged you. Okay, so you have to dismiss the idea in your head that anyone can wrong you. Okay, everyone is an NPC. They're just writing their script, and no one can wrong you. Okay, only you can allow people to wrong you. That's kind of the first level of defense on emotional mastery. The second level is that you realize that you're wired a certain way, but just because you're wired to experience an emotion based on an interpretation of an event doesn't mean that you have to act that out. You can acknowledge and experience that emotion, and then you can observe that emotion and say, okay, I'm doing this right now. I'm angry right now. And then you can create a feedback loop to rewire that in the future. We talked about more of the position of being in power and if you have to bluff, but there's also a whole set of dynamics of recognizing when you're not in power, and you need to play that even more carefully, right? When you're not in power, you have to behave in a completely opposite way than what I just demonstrated in this video. If you're interested in that, like I said, click the subscribe button. I will have a video coming up on that. If you leave a comment and ask me for it, I'll talk to you next time. Take care.